everyone and welcome back. I'm Mitsuru Kirijo and today we're going to be making a new My Little Pony Equestria Girls custom. So today we are going to be making our third Persona girl, Mitsuru Kirijo from Persona 3. And I am very excited for this custom. So today we're going to be using Rarity's body and Fluttershy's hair, or at the very least, the back of her hair. Oh my goodness, this is going to look so good. I'm so excited. So without further ado, let's get started. So to start off, we're going to be removing Rarity's hair, starting with the back and of course the bangs. And make sure that you leave this gap back here so that you have room to fit Fluttershy's hair on. After that, we're going to bring Fluttershy over here and remove the back of her hair. We're going to leave her bangs on there because we don't really need those, but we're going to very carefully use our X-Acto knife to cut out Fluttershy's hair, being very careful so as not to damage the hair itself because we want this to be intact. The reason we're doing this is because clay can be very fragile, especially with long hair. So by doing this and using Fluttershy's hair, we don't run the risk of it breaking during the painting process or even later on down the line. So we'll go ahead and remove that off of there. And then using some super glue, we're going to attach it to the back of her head. So make sure that you use a lot of glue in here because you want to get that nice and filled in so that it keeps that little prong part in there. And then of course you also want to make sure to apply glue to the rest of her head as well to keep it all nice and in place. Next, we're going to go ahead and cut out a bow out of styrofoam. This is going to be a lot lighter as well as easier to work with than the clay. This is also going to break a lot less easily, and it's also going to be a lot better than simply painting the bow onto her chest because it will give us that nice 3D effect and make her look a lot more complete. And also be sure to cut out an extra little circle so that you can get the knot for her bow. Next, we're going to go ahead and glue the pieces back together. And as you can see, I did cut the pieces out individually. This is basically just so that it will add a little bit more definition and look a lot nicer. Once that's all dry, we're going to go ahead and paint the bow a nice red color. And then we're going to go ahead and grab our flesh tone and start painting her face, arms, and legs. For this next step, I went ahead and removed her head so that she's easier to work with. And since her hair isn't made out of clay, she's going to be a lot less fragile. So we're going to go ahead and take this nice ruby red color. I made this by mixing red, pink, and just a tiny bit of black. And we're going to go ahead and color in her irises. Next, we'll clean it up and fill in the whites of her eye. And then with some black, we're going to go ahead and fill in her pupils. I unfortunately seem to have lost the footage where I did the highlights in her eyes. But, of course, after the paint is dry, we have to do the highlights in her eyes, and then outline the top with black. After drawing on the eyelashes, we're going to go ahead and paint in her smile with black. And if it's not straight, you can go ahead and just come back in with your flesh tone and clean that up. Moving on to her body, we're going to go ahead and paint her completely white. Now, I normally don't show this part, but I'm going to go ahead and remove the diamonds from her skirt. This part is, of course, optional, but I like to do it as it has a little bit more detail to my customs, especially since the Gecko Kanhai uniform doesn't really have diamonds on it. Next, to make the armband, we're going to take this small strip of styrofoam, and then we're going to hold it over a flame to try and bend it into a nice little curl. I actually got this idea from Dolliteful and her doll armor videos. I thought it was a really cool concept and figured that using styrofoam might be a good way to make clothing for these little Equestria Girls minis, since they are so much smaller. And I also had a whole bunch of styrofoam lying around from a previous craft that I had made. Of course, you want to be very careful when holding stuff over an open flame, so if you are a minor, be sure to ask a parent for help. Now, as you could probably see on the skirt over here, I did try to fill in the lines on the skirt with air-dry clay. Unfortunately, the clay was kind of chipping a lot, so I wound up not really being able to salvage it, and I just wound up leaving it with the lines and just sort of peeled off the clay. Once you've got that all curled up, we're going to go ahead and measure it out to Mitsuru's arm. Now, this is a little bit tricky trying to get this around, but you do want it to be nice and snug. And once you've got it all measured, we're going to go ahead and take our X-Acto knife and cut it right on the line. Sorry, you can't see it too well. And then with some glue, we're going to go ahead and attach it to her arm. For this next part, we're going to go ahead and paint in her neck with our flesh tone. Now, I did add a little bit of V at first, but then I realized that I had it a little too far down, so I did wind up moving it up. After that, we're going to take the same color we used for her eyes and finally move on to her hair. Once that is done, we're going to reattach her head and then fill in the gap on her forehead with some air-dry clay. Next, we're going to take a little piece of clay and roll it out into a teardrop piece. Measure it up against her head and make sure that we get the right shape and length. Once we've got about the right shape and place, we're going to take our X-Acto knife and sort of shape that out a little bit more. This will help it to match the back of the hair, along with most other Equestria Girls dolls. Be sure to smoothen out the edges and then shape that to her head. Try not to press it on there too tight because we want to be able to remove it later on without much difficulty. And now use the same method to apply 2 more pieces to her bangs. Using a damp paintbrush, we're going to very lightly add a little bit of water and smoothen out all of those little rough edges. While we're waiting for that to dry, we're going to go ahead and take our X-Acto knife and draw some lines all the way down her shirt and all the way around, with the center one being a little bit thicker than the rest of them. This is going to give the illusion of the ribbing that Mitsuru has on her shirt, which is different from most of the other girls' uniforms. This is also a nice little trick for adding a little bit of extra detail without having to really paint anything on there and winding up with really thick lines. Once all the detailing on her shirt is done, we're going to take some glue and add our ribbon onto her chest. Finally! Next, we're going to go ahead and paint her armband. I really should have done this before adding the ribbon on, but I wasn't thinking about it, and I wound up doing the bow first, so this is more of an afterthought. But we want the two pieces to match up. Next, we're going to take a mixture of blue and black and paint her skirts. We're also going to go ahead and paint in her boots as well. Originally, I did try to make these go above her knees, but then I looked again at a picture of Mitsuru and realized that her boots do go up to her knees and not past her knees, so I wound up just repainting over this with the flesh tone. After removing my bangs and giving them to Leo to guard, I unfortunately realized that her expression was a little too bright and not intense enough for Mitsuru. So taking a little bit of the flesh tone, I wound up painting over her eyebrows and her eyes, trying to give the eyes a bit more of the shape that I wanted for them. And then after that was dry, just redoing everything. It took me a couple tries to get the eyebrows just right, so I wound up just sort of making them kind of thick and then reshaping them with the flesh tone afterwards. In hindsight, I probably should have done the eyelashes first. Next, we're going to paint her hands a flesh tone. I said arms earlier, but Mitsuru's main outfit has long sleeves, so we really just need to paint her hands. While that is drying, we're going to go ahead and paint the bangs with the same color as the rest of her hair. Now, I removed the bangs this time because I thought that this would be a lot easier than trying to paint it on her face and trying to avoid painting over the details in her eyes, especially since her bangs do go over one of her eyes. And once those are all done, we're going to go ahead and glue them back onto her face. Oh my gosh, she's really starting to come together now. She looks so good! While the glue was still wet, I went ahead and took a very damp paintbrush and just sort of cleaned up the glue a little bit, just so that we don't have these little clumps of glue on her when she's done drying. One of the downsides to this method of reattaching the bangs afterwards is that it left us with a lot of gaps. So since I had a lot of paint left over from mixing up her hair color, I wound up just globbing a lot of that onto the paintbrush and sort of filling in the gaps with that. Afterwards, I decided I really didn't like how her boots looked. They looked just like shoes with black socks. So I wound up taking some air dry clay and sort of adding a little bit more detail on there, sort of filling all of that in and making them look more like boots. Once that's all dried and repainted, I went ahead and took my base and painted it the same color as Mitsuru's hair. Now this part is again optional, but I think it adds a little bit more detail to the doll. I did the same thing for Yukari in making her base black, just like the majority of her maid outfit, but with Fuka I kept the base the same color as it was before. Now for an added detail, we're going to be making her sword. So to do this, we're going to be stretching out this paper clip and trying to make it very thin. Now you are going to need some tools for this, as the paper clip is very difficult to bend. I was using a monkey wrench for this, thinking that the monkey wrench wouldn't harm the metal as much as the pliers would, but I eventually just painted over it anyway, so it really doesn't matter. I actually would recommend using 2 pairs of pliers instead of a monkey wrench, as you'll get a much better grip on it. I also went ahead and smoothed out the edges as well. Again, you don't have to do this since the paint is going to smoothen this over anyway, but I was thinking at first that I was just going to make her a metal sword instead of a white sword. After that's all cleaned up, we're going to go ahead and measure it out on her hand, leaving a little bit of excess for the handle. Once that's all done, we're going to go ahead and paint the majority of the sword white, with just a little bit of room left for the handle. And make sure that you add lots of layers to help make it a little bit thicker. Once that's done, we're going to do the same thing to the handle, but with gray. And in order to reduce how many layers of white I was going to need for the guard, I wound up mixing in some white paint with the clay, just so that I would only need 1 layer on the top, so that I wouldn't have to risk getting any paint on her hand. I also wound up not really adding any paint to the bottom since it was already white, but I did wind up painting the top of it, especially since it helps to fill in that gap and make it seem less like 2 pieces and more like 1. And last but not least, we are going to add our clear coat. And there she is! Oh my gosh, she looks so good! I love this new expression that she has on her face. She looks so intense. She truly is the queen of executions. Now, I do have to apologize to you guys for how long it took me to get this doll out. Unfortunately, I was sort of sick, sort of not for a while. I've been trying to lose weight, and I was trying to cut out some of the less healthy foods from my diet. Well, not really cut out completely, but at the very least cut down on them to more of a healthy amount. And unfortunately, most of those items had vitamin D in them, which my bones were not absorbing from my multivitamin. So I was having a vitamin D deficiency, and I was really sore for quite a while there. And unfortunately, it was affecting my productivity, both at home and at work. I was able to work through it at work, but at home, I was just done. I wanted to go lie down in bed. Lying in bed hurt, but at the very least, it hurt less than sitting up, working on a doll, leaning over, being on the computer, and all that other fun stuff. But I am doing better now. I've got my diet fixed up. Hopefully that this won't put back on the pounds that I've recently lost. I'm really proud of myself for losing this weight, and I'm so sad that I don't get me wrong, I don't see myself as fat or anything, but I do know that it would be healthy for me to lose a couple pounds, especially since I do have a family history of diabetes that really would not be good for me to have. Especially with my foot the way that it is. If you don't know, it is deformed, so I can't really get exercise. So the only way that I can lose weight is by watching what I eat. That is the only way that I can do it. Unless I were to get foot surgery, which is going to cost way more than I can afford, even if I start making more doll commissions. Speaking of which, I do have some doll commissions that I will be working on. Those will be the next doll videos. However, I am not going to be doing doll videos every week like I was before. I'm still going to be doing doll videos for a long time on this channel, but I just can't afford to make them weekly like I have been. And I'm still going to be doing weekly videos, but we're going to be doing some different stuff on here. I'm going to be doing some art videos, some discussion videos. Basically, I'm going to have a schedule where, like, the first week I release a certain kind of video, the second week of the month I release a different video, and then like third week I've got a certain video planned, and then the fourth week is a certain video, and those will still be going up every Wednesday. I am going to be getting my internet set back up finally, because I'm finally able to get this dumb Comcast thing fixed from almost 2 years ago now that I've been working on this. But that's a long story. If you want that information, go watch my channel update that I did last week. I am really excited about that, but thanks to the fact that I can get my internet set back up, that means that I can do weekly streams again. Those are going to be scheduled every Friday night from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And those are going to be, various things. Sometimes there'll be art streams, sometimes there'll be work on dolls, so you can get an inside scoop on what dolls I'm working on next. Sometimes they're going to be video games. In fact, for a good couple weeks, it's probably going to be all that you'll see, because Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee's coming out, and I do plan on live streaming that on here, so get excited for that! I do have other stuff in mind that I want to do. I plan on doing more comic dubs, not just of my own stuff, but of other people's stuff as well. So if you have a comic or really like one that you would like me to do, let me know in the comment section or hit me up on Tumblr. If it is your comic, then I'd be more than happy to do it as long as it's safe for work. And if it's somebody else's comic, I will of course be asking the artist for permission. So that's basically what's going to be going on this channel. I hope you guys look forward to more dolls and more other content coming from me. I'm Mitsuru Kirijo, signing out, wishing you all a magical day.